Audra had always known that secrets in Genoa City never stayed buried forever. They merely waited for the perfect moment to explode, and tonight, standing in the dimly lit penthouse overlooking the restless city, she felt the storm gathering in her chest as she stared at Claire, whose calm, carefully rehearsed smile did nothing to mask the truth Audra had spent weeks uncovering, a truth that could shatter alliances, destroy reputations, and rewrite the power dynamics of everyone involved. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken tension. As rain streaked down the massive windows like tears the city itself refused to shed, and Audra's heels echoed sharply against the marble floor with every step she took closer to the woman who had infiltrated their lives under a false name, a false story, and a dangerously convincing performance. Claire folded her arms, pretending confidence, but her eyes betrayed her. Flickering, calculating, searching for an escape that no longer existed. "You look nervous," Audra said coolly, her voice smooth yet laced with steel, almost like someone who's about to be exposed. Claire laughed, too quickly, too lightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." But Audra had already won. The files were secured, the DNA results verified, the photographs authenticated, and the story that had once been whispered in shadows was now screaming for daylight. Audra reached into her bag and slowly pulled out a manila envelope, letting it hang between them like a loaded weapon. "You see, Claire," she continued, her eyes dark with triumph, "you didn't just lie about your past, you erased it. But you forgot something very important." She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a dangerous whisper. "There's always someone who remembers." Claire's smile finally cracked, the edges trembling as the color drained from her face. "You don't know anything," she snapped, but the desperation in her tone betrayed her. Audra smirked and opened the envelope, spilling photographs across the glass table. Images of a young girl standing beside a woman who looked hauntingly familiar, hospital records stamped with names that didn't match Claire's current identity, and a DNA report with bold, undeniable proof. "Oh, I know everything," Audra said. "Your real name isn't Claire. It's Clara Hastings." The name hit the room like thunder. Claire staggered back a step, her breath hitching, her carefully built facade collapsing under the weight of a single word. "That's not true," she whispered, but the lie sounded hollow even to her own ears. Audra leaned against the table, crossing her arms. "Born in Chicago. Mother, Evelyn Hastings. Father unknown. You disappeared after the fire, new name, new face, new life." Claire's eyes flashed with anger, fear, and something dangerously close to hatred. "You don't understand what I went through," she hissed. "You don't know what they did to me." Audra's gaze hardened. "What I do know is why you came to Genoa City, and it wasn't for a fresh start." The rain outside intensified, thunder rolling like a warning from the heavens themselves as Audra revealed the final piece of the puzzle. "You're not here by accident. You're here because you're Victor Newman's granddaughter." Silence fell like a guillotine. Claire's world shattered in that instant, the truth slicing through her defenses with surgical precision. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The secret she had protected with every breath, every lie, every calculated move was now standing in the open, naked and undeniable. "You manipulated Nikki. You played Kyle. You used Victoria. All to get closer to Victor," Audra continued. "Because revenge isn't something you forget. It's something you inherit." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of rage, of pain that had been festering for years beneath her carefully constructed mask. "He destroyed my family," Claire finally whispered. "He took everything from us." Audra tilted her head. "So you decided to take something from him?" Claire laughed bitterly. "I decided to take everything." The confession hung in the air, raw and dangerous, as the storm outside mirrored the chaos erupting inside the room. Audra straightened, her expression unreadable. "The problem is," she said, "your revenge just became public." Claire's hands shook as she clenched them into fists. "You think exposing me changes anything?" she demanded. "The damage is already done." Audra's lips curved into a slow, victorious smile. "No, Claire. The damage is just beginning." Footsteps echoed in the hallway, approaching, inevitable. Claire's head snapped toward the door, panic flashing across her face. "Who did you tell?" she whispered. Audra didn't answer. The door opened, revealing Victor Newman himself, his imposing presence filling the room like a living shadow. His sharp eyes locked onto Claire with chilling intensity. "Clara Hastings," he said slowly, his voice low and dangerous. "Or should I say my granddaughter?" Claire's knees nearly buckled as the man she had spent years plotting against finally stood before her, fully aware of who she was. "You lied to everyone," Victor continued. "But you couldn't lie to Blood." Claire lifted her chin, defiance replacing fear. "Blood doesn't make family," she snapped. "You proved that." Nikki appeared behind Victor, her face pale with shock, her eyes brimming with heartbreak. "All this time," Nikki whispered, "you were using us." Claire's voice cracked. "I was surviving." Victoria stepped forward, her expression a mixture of anger and sorrow. "You hurt people who didn't deserve it." Claire's laugh was hollow. So did he. The room became a battlefield of emotions: betrayal, grief, fury, and long-buried pain colliding in explosive silence. Audra watched it all unfold, the architect of a revelation that would reshape every relationship in Genoa City. "You wanted answers," Audra said quietly. "Now you have them." Victor's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Audra?" he asked. She met his gaze without flinching. "The truth always wins," she replied. Claire looked around the room, realizing there was nowhere left to hide. Her secret was no longer hers. It belonged to the city, to the family she had tried to destroy, to the legacy she had tried to rewrite. "You can expose my name," she said softly, "but you can't erase my pain." Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "And you can't escape your blood." The storm outside finally broke, rain hammering against the windows as lightning illuminated the fractured faces in the room. Faces forever changed by the truth. Audra picked up her coat, her mission complete, her power undeniable. As she walked toward the door, she paused. "One more thing, Claire," she said over her shoulder. "In Genoa City, secrets don't just ruin lives, they redefine them." The door closed behind her, leaving chaos, consequences, and a shattered identity in its wake, while Claire, no longer hidden, no longer protected, stood exposed, her past colliding with her present, her future uncertain, and her revenge far from over. The aftermath of Audra's explosive revelation didn't simply ripple through Genoa City, it detonated it, leaving emotional wreckage in every corner of the Newman empire as Claire, no longer shielded by lies or aliases, found herself standing in the ruins of the life she had so carefully constructed, her once polished confidence shattered into fragile fragments while Victor's piercing stare followed her every breath like a hunter tracking wounded prey. The penthouse felt colder now, the luxury stripped of its power as Nikki collapsed onto the sofa, her hands trembling, her eyes glistening with betrayal so deep it felt physical, as though Claire's deception had carved a wound straight through her heart. "I welcomed you," Nikki whispered, her voice breaking. "I trusted you." And Claire, for the first time, had no clever response, no rehearsed excuse, only the raw truth burning in her chest like a confession that had waited a lifetime to be spoken. Victoria stood rigid near the window, arms crossed tightly as if holding herself together, anger and sorrow warring behind her eyes. "You didn't just lie," she said coldly. "You used us." Claire swallowed hard. "I learned from the best," she replied, her gaze locking onto Victor, whose silence was more terrifying than any shouted accusation. The great Victor Newman, the man who had built empires and destroyed enemies with equal precision, simply stared at the young woman who carried his blood yet wore his legacy like a weapon, his jaw clenched, his eyes dark with a storm of fury, guilt, and something dangerously close to regret. "You came here for revenge," Victor finally said, his voice low and lethal. "And you succeeded in one thing, proving that betrayal runs in families." Claire flinched but refused to look away. "You abandoned my mother," she shot back, the words sharp as broken glass. "You erased us like we never existed." Nikki gasped softly, the truth slicing deeper with every second, while Victoria's expression shifted from anger to shock. "There was a child," Victoria whispered, more to herself than anyone else. All this time, the room felt heavy with unspoken history, decades of buried secrets clawing their way to the surface as Claire's carefully guarded pain finally spilled out. "My mother died believing you didn't care," she said, her voice cracking. "She raised me on survival, not forgiveness." Victor's eyes flickered, a rare sign of vulnerability breaking through his iron facade. but it vanished just as quickly as it appeared. Pain does not excuse manipulation, he said firmly. And it does not justify the damage you've caused. Claire let out a hollow laugh. Damage, she echoed bitterly. You taught me that damage is power. Nikki stood up suddenly, tears streaming down her face. Get out, she whispered. I can't look at you. Claire hesitated, her bravado finally dissolving into something heartbreakingly human. I never meant to hurt you, she said softly. Nikki shook her head. But you did. The words fell like a verdict. Claire turned slowly, her footsteps echoing through the penthouse as she walked toward the door, her future unraveling with every step. But the fallout had only just begun. Across town, Audra sat alone in the shadows of her sleek apartment, watching the news replay footage of Victor's tense departure from the penthouse, her lips curving into a satisfied smile as the consequences of her revelation spread like wildfire. Truth is the sharpest weapon, she murmured, lifting a glass of champagne, her victory intoxicating yet dangerous, because Audra knew Genoa City never rewarded those who exposed secrets without demanding a price. Meanwhile, Kyle paced furiously in the Abbott living room, his phone clenched in his hand as whispers of Claire's true identity flooded every corner of the city. She played us, he muttered, betrayal burning in his chest, memories of stolen glances and false promises now poisoned by the truth. Jack watched his son carefully, concern etched across his face. Genoa City has a way of revealing who people really are, Jack said. The question is, what will Claire do now? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Alone in a dim motel room on the edge of town, Claire stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror, the woman looking back at her no longer Claire, no longer Clara, but something forged from anger, loss, and unfinished revenge. They think this is over, she whispered to herself. They think exposure means defeat. Her phone buzzed. A single message appeared on the screen. You're not alone. Her eyes narrowed as a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. No, she replied quietly. I'm just getting started. Back at Newman Enterprises, Victor stood at the window of his office, the city lights reflecting in his eyes like distant flames. Nikki entered silently, her strength shaken but not broken. She's your granddaughter, she said. What are you going to do? Victor's voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of inevitability. I will protect this family, he said, even if it means destroying what threatens it. Nikki closed her eyes, knowing all too well what that meant. In Genoa City, bloodlines didn't guarantee loyalty, only conflict. And as alliances shifted, secrets resurfaced and vengeance found new fuel, one thing became painfully clear. Audra's revelation had not ended the war. It had only changed the battlefield, and Claire's true identity, once her greatest secret, had now become her most dangerous weapon. Claire didn't disappear after Audra exposed her. She transformed, shedding the last remnants of the fragile identity she had worn like armor and stepping fully into the woman her past had forged, a woman fueled by loss, rage, and a hunger for justice that no revelation could extinguish. And as Genoa City slept under a veil of false calm, Claire moved through the shadows with purpose, her eyes burning with the certainty that exposure was not defeat but liberation. In the dim glow of a deserted rooftop, she stared out at the skyline that had once promised her redemption, and now mocked her with memories of betrayal, every light below representing a life that had judged her without knowing her story. They think they broke me, she whispered to the cold night air. But they only reminded me who I am. Her phone buzzed again, the same unknown number that had reached out earlier, and this time she answered without hesitation. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady, unafraid, and on the other end, a familiar yet dangerous voice replied, Good, because Victor Newman is about to learn what he created. Across town, Victor sat in his office reviewing security reports, unaware that the storm he feared had already taken shape, while Nikki paced the living room, her heart heavy with doubt, knowing in her soul that Claire's story wasn't finished, that pain like hers never simply vanished, it evolved. Victoria, torn between anger and empathy, found herself staring at old family photos, haunted by the possibility that blood didn't just bind them, it cursed them. Meanwhile, Kyle tried to drown his confusion in late-night distractions, but Claire's face haunted him, not the liar, but the wounded woman who had once looked at him like he was her only safe place. In a remote warehouse on the outskirts of Genoa City, Claire met with the shadowy ally who had reached out, a man whose connection to Victor's past ran deeper than anyone realized, his presence a living reminder that Victor's empire had been built on more than ambition. It had been built on casualties. "You lost your mother," the man said quietly. "I lost my future." Claire's jaw tightened. "Then help me take back what he stole." He nodded. "The Newmans believe their power is untouchable," he said. "But every empire has a fracture." Claire's eyes gleamed. "And I know exactly where to strike." The plan wasn't reckless. It was calculated, strategic, and deeply personal, beginning not with destruction, but with exposure targeting the fragile alliances Victor relied on, the unspoken secrets still buried in his past. Within days, anonymous leaks surfaced, whispers of old scandals, hidden payoffs, and long-forgotten betrayals that shook the foundation of Newman Enterprises, sending stock prices spiraling and forcing Victor into damage control. "Someone is orchestrating this," Victor growled, slamming his fist on the desk, while Nikki watched in silence, fear creeping into her heart as she realized this wasn't random chaos. It was revenge with a face. AUDRA, ever the strategist, sensed the shift immediately, her instincts screaming that Claire was no longer running. She was hunting. "You started a war," AUDRA murmured to herself, staring at her phone. "But can you finish it?" Claire, however, was just getting started. Her next move was the most dangerous of all. She returned to Genoa City, not as Claire the infiltrator, but as Clara Hastings, the granddaughter Victor had erased, and when she walked into society, every conversation stopped, every stare sharpened, the city holding its breath as she claimed her place in the narrative she had been denied. "You're not afraid anymore," Cal said quietly when he confronted her. Claire met his gaze. "Fear is for people who still have something to lose." Nikki watched from across the room, tears threatening to fall as she saw not a villain, but a broken soul demanding to be seen. Victor arrived moments later, his presence commanding silence, his eyes locking onto Claire with a mixture of fury and reluctant recognition. "You should have stayed gone," he warned. Claire smiled, not with malice but with purpose. "You taught me never to walk away from a fight." The tension crackled like lightning as years of resentment stood face to face, and for the first time, Victor saw not an enemy, but the reflection of his own ruthless legacy staring back at him. "This ends now," he declared. Claire stepped closer. "No," she said softly. "This is where it begins." The crowd scattered, sensing the danger in the air, while AUDRA watched from the shadows, realizing that the truth she had unleashed had evolved into something far more volatile. Claire's revenge wasn't about destruction anymore. It was about rewriting history, forcing Victor to confront the consequences of the lives he had abandoned, the blood he had denied, and the legacy he had tried to bury. As the night deepened, Genoa City buzzed with rumors, alliances shifted, and old enemies prepared for war, because one truth had become undeniable. Claire was no longer the girl who hid behind lies. She was the woman who would make the Newmans remember her name.